Dr. Bradshaw YouTube channel. In this video, I am recapping episode 4 of Lovecraft Country. This episode was titled A History of Violence, which coincidentally, we were just having this conversation on Twitter a few days ago, or it's been going on for a couple of days now, where we've been discussing whether or not it's appropriate to physically discipline your children as Black people. I think that we have historically been, and let me just also say, I have friends who are non-Black people of color, and they have talked to me about how, you know, they got physically disciplined. I have white friends who got physically disciplined, so I don't think that it's limited to our community. But I do, as I've gotten older, I have started to take issue with it, mostly because I have a niece and I have a nephew, and I cannot imagine putting my hands on them as a grown adult person. It does not sit right with my spirit to physically discipline a small child. It feels to me like a vestige of slavery. It feels like that kind of discipline was passed down as a history of violence. And in the podcast for Lovecraft Country, they made reference to an Audre Lorde essay called The Master's Tools. And one of the quotes from that essay is that you cannot bring down the master's house using the master's tools. I think that whooping your kids is a tool of racism, of oppression. When I think back to my own discipline as a kid, the things that I got whoopings for, I'm like, y'all really could have just talked to me about that. Like, why was all this necessary? Again, I say this as a person who isn't a parent. I don't know what's going to happen when or if I become one. But as of right now, I do feel like we pass down this history of violence that came from our oppressor. And I want us to not. I want us to find better ways to connect with our children. And I think that we see that with this interaction between Montrose and Tick, where all throughout the episode, Montrose is coming down so hard on Tick, and then you see Tick having that same energy towards Letty, and you can just see how we pass down our own tools of solving problems, of resolving conflict. And another thing that they mentioned in the podcast is that each person in this episode, between Letty, Tick, and Montrose, they each have their own tool or their own method by which they would like to confront this issue, if they want to at all. Tick wants to use academia. You know, he's a learned man. He wants to read, and he wants to, you know, traverse this course alone. Even when you look at the scene where they're in the library, there's this giant portrait of W.E.B. Du Bois, who his belief was that the educated of Black men, I don't even think that it was of Black people, I think of Black men, were going to be the ones who would save our race, or that we needed to prioritize political office and education as a means to combat racism. Letty is much more get shit done. Let's just go out and do it. Let's just get shit done. She has much more of a, I want to say like a wild spirit or a can-do attitude. Montrose is like, let's just sit down over here. Let's not go any further with any of this, because we don't know what's on the other side of this. I don't want to be no pioneer. Y'all niggas tripping. And the episode opens with Montrose having this dark night of the soul, where he's listening to this radio broadcast, and they're saying that the only way for the US to defeat Russia is to take out Russia's supply of nuclear weapons. And I think that Montrose has it in his head that the only way that they can defeat the sons of Adam, Christina, all of these supernatural forces, is to get rid of their weapons. And I think that's why he burns the bylaws that Uncle George gave him, which Uncle George told him, you know, use this to save the family, to protect the family, to protect my son. He commits it to memory and burns it. And it's like, are you doing this because you're afraid, or because you're trying to protect Tick? Is it a mixture of both? Like, what are we doing? So Tick goes to the library after he tries to kill Christina. because he wants to find these lost pages that belong to Titus so that he can decipher them and come up with some tools by which they can defeat Christina, because we don't know what Christina's trying to do. We don't know what her end goal is here. She's a white woman. You can't really trust them like that. And he's already saying that he can't kill her. So he wants to find out what tools he can use to take her out the game. And Christina done pulled up on Letty at her own house and then revealed that Tick knew that she bought the house. And all of the things are coming out. So Letty goes to the library to confront Tick, where Tick was about to just unceremoniously leave. He was going to abandon Letty, and we know that Letty has these abandonment issues from her mom, so you could imagine the emotional state that she's in. Well, come to find out, Montrose is already hip to all of this game that Tick is in here reading. He can see in these library books that Montrose has already checked out all of these books. He's already gathered all of this knowledge. And I don't know if you guys noticed the little boy reading Journey to the Center of the Earth, the little boy who was over there making all this noise. And that kind of gave us a little bit of foreshadowing, or a little bit of an Easter egg into this episode that was very Goonies, Indiana Jones, very, adventure, treasure hunt. We got to find some shit to protect some artifacts. It was, so I thought that was really cool. I only noticed that when I went back and watched the second time. So I also want to say I really enjoyed them playing modern music in this 50s setting. Rihanna is my personal hero, so I loved that Bitch Better Have My Money was blasting as Christina was driving through town in this very fancy car. And again, she pulled up on Letty because she wants this orrery. I think the orrery is that solar system that Hippolyta took from the house that she's trying to decipher, open. Why does it have two suns? And Hippolyta's, on the phone with her dad trying to figure this thing out. Hippolyta has a very sincere knowledge, awareness, curiosity of astrology, and I want to know what that's about. I feel like that's going to really come in handy later on, and especially because she has this very historical name of Hippolyta and her daughter's name is Diana. Like, what is that? Are they going to save the day? I want to know. So, sorry, you guys know I have my notes because there's so much to unpack in this episode. I want to know what Christina's end goal is. Why does she want this orrery? Is she just trying to get into the sons of Adam? And then I also noticed that when she pulled up on Letty, she was trying to connect with her on the level of being a woman. And it was almost this divide and conquer kind of shit where, she's not really being allowed into the sons of Adam because even though she's white, she is a woman. And this police officer makes it very clear, like, girl, you're not welcome here. And she's telling Letty, like, don't let these men do X, Y, and Z. And fortunately, Letty has enough sense to not be manipulated in that regard. But I still want to know what her end game is. So we end up going on a road trip to a museum in Boston where there is a vault or a tunnel by which they can navigate and find these lost scrolls. Okay. Hippolyta and Diana come along. So does Tree for some god-awful reason. What an awful person. I really don't like him. But Tree does reveal to us something that I picked up on a little bit when Uncle George was dying, and he mentioned that it seems like Montrose actually is gay. And Uncle George made mention of the fact that he had this very sincere or special kind of love when he was younger that their dad tried to beat out of him. I think that Montrose endured so much abuse because I think that his dad thought that he was soft or sweet or gay. And I think that that speaks a bit to Montrose's anger and the drinking, and maybe that's why his wife started a relationship with Uncle George. Maybe she was his beard. Like, I hope that we get to dive into that a little bit more, but I think it's really interesting that that Tick wants to keep Montrose, who is possibly a gay man. out of the loop, and he wants to keep Letty, a black woman, out of the loop. And I loved when Letty confronted him and said, stop acting like this is only happening to you. It's interesting to me that you have a straight black man who just wants to fight the monsters on his own, when you have allies in the form of black women and allies in the form of black LGBTQ who are doing the work and who have already done the work, but instead of reaching out to them, you would rather do unnecessary work on your own. And I think that's something that we can take a lesson from. Just throwing that out there. This episode, so Ruby goes to this department store. At the time, you know, being a shop girl at this department store was like a prestige job. It's been on her to-do list, her vision board. She's like, this is what I'm gonna do. This is gonna be my ticket to elevating. And she walks in, and there is a dark-skinned black woman who has been hired. And this shakes her, because it's just like, damn, the one time I didn't come, or, you know, I allowed myself to be distracted by Letty, and I didn't come and apply, and this woman got this job. I was wondering, did that woman get that job because she was smaller? I think it was very intentional that, or I know that it was very intentional per the podcast, that this woman was also dark-skinned, but was it also intentional that she was smaller? Because there's always an ism working against you, especially back during this time. So you're a woman, you're black, you're dark-skinned, and you're curvier. So was that a strike against her, or was it just they caught her slipping? So she's having a hard night at this bar, and William, who you guys know we think is actually Christina, they're the same person, uses Ruby's vulnerability to get inside their house. I'm wondering, is there some kind of vampire shit happening with Christina / William, in that they needed to be invited into the house in order to get in there? On the one hand, you know, Ruby, maybe you just wanted to throw that wop on somebody because you was having a bad night and you needed an energetic release. I don't know. I don't feel good about what happened there. I don't think that she actually bought into anything that William was saying about how he could change her life, but I also do not feel good about him using her. We'll see what happens there, but that did not feel good to me. I mean, it looked like a good time. Looked like a good time. Don't get me wrong, but I didn't like it. And I think I just, you know, I feel protective of that character. So I was like, not really too into this. So we're in the tunnel. It's giving Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's giving, my anxiety was on 100,000 trillion, because I am afraid of heights, to the extent that even when I see heights on television, I feel, it does something to my nervous system. I feel it in my body. I don't like it. What I really liked was this conversation about this knot, right? And this is another, speaking to another history of violence, because the Freeman family learned how to tie these knots so properly because there was a threat of violence from the oppressor, from their slave master, that if these horses escape in the night, you're going to be physically punished for it. So you better know how to tie these knots really, really well. Once again, that history of violence comes back into play as a means of protection, as a means of safety. I thought that was really, really interesting. And I really liked even the little bit of comedic relief that once they got, you know, across this very narrow and also disappearing bridge, that Montrose was like, you know, Jesse Owens ain't got shit on me. Did you see my jump? Like, I don't know, that little bit of joy from him made me really happy, because this is a very tortured soul of a character, and I always have a soft spot for those. It's important to note to me that their collective, the reason that they were able to get through this tunnel is because of their collective energy, because of their collective tools. Again, I think that's something that we need to make note of as a community, that we all have a role to play here, and we have to put those roles together. We can't say your way is superior, my way is superior. I think that we need to have more of a collectivism type of energy in order to progress. That's just as an aside. I also really appreciated Montrose giving the fatherly advice to Tick, that you need to apologize to your girl. And one thing my daddy always told me is you should always have a love song for your woman. I thought that that was sweet, because it does show that at some point his father did try to be a father to him, and at this point Montrose was trying to be a father to his son. So they get to this room of mummified indigenous peoples, and this room, I guess, is like there's a spell upon it, whereby they go for this scroll and this mummified person comes to life. And what was her name? I wrote it down. Their name. Their name was Yahima. And they say that they are a two-spirit person, which is a term that is used by indigenous groups to, it's like an umbrella term to describe different sexual and gender identities. I'm going to put a link to an article that I read not too long ago about that term. I think it's also something that Janet Mock mentioned on her podcast a while back, that in her culture, because I believe she's from Hawaii, trans people are not looked down upon. They're looked upon as special because they are assumed to have both spirit of man and woman inside of them. I think that that's a really cool and a really beautiful way to look at that community as special and not just marginalized. So make sure you guys check out that article in the episode description. So Yahima, in her native tongue, in their native tongue, expresses to Tick, who can understand them. So Yahima explains to Tick that Titus came to their people looking for the words on this scroll to be deciphered, and they understood it, so they were, translating for Titus. But once they realized that Titus was not actually a great person, they said they wouldn't help him anymore. And doing what colonizers do to indigenous peoples, he killed her people and trapped them in this room. And Yahima doesn't know Tick's intentions or know his spirit, so they don't necessarily want to help. And then, of course, this great flood comes along, and they all have to escape together. And what happened next, I do not feel good about. I really, really hated that this happened, and I hope that there's a method to the madness. I think that there is. But they escape through this elevator, which I'm thinking is the elevator in Letty's house. So this tunnel goes from Boston to Letty's house in Chicago. What? And, Tick decides that he wants to teach Yahima English, and that this will help them to decipher the pages easier, and that they can get some answers. And Montrose tells Tick that he's proud of him, and it, looks like there's this great moment, and then you see Montrose go into this room, and he kills Yahima. And I felt so devastated by that, because here it is that you are potentially a gay man, and you want to kill this other person who is other in a very similar way to you. And this person is an indigenous person who has already experienced genocide of their own. Are you doing this to protect Tick? And what exactly are you protecting him from? And was this necessary? I think people do have a lot of criticism of this, because there is an ongoing trope about how shows tend to just kill off their gay characters, or, I think this could have been a really great opportunity to have a trans or intersex person on this show, and I was devastated that they didn't get to be here for very long. And now I'm looking at this Montrose character like, I get that you are a tortured soul, but do you have to ruin every life around you? It made me really upset. We also see that Hippolyta and Diana are leaving from Boston, and they feel very uneasy about the whole thing. You know, Hippolyta has expressed that she has questions and concerns about what actually happened to Uncle George, and Diana wants to know, well, how did they get back to Chicago without the car? And, you know, they have questions that need answers. Diana is looking at Uncle George's atlas, and Hippolyta decides that she's going to turn the car around and they're going to look for answers. In the dark, in Jim Crow era America, I don't know where this is going to go. I'm nervous. I really enjoyed this episode. I really enjoyed that William went and beat up those police officers. I can't even say that I have predictions, because this show gives me some new shit every week that I don't anticipate or understand or see coming. So I just said the same thing 3 different times. But anyway, I never know what the hell is going to happen. So y'all are along on this ride with me. Shouts out to my friends who allow me to text them while I watch the show, because my anxiety is through the roof. So be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe. Send me money via Patreon if you like what you see and want to help a sister out. And I will see you guys next week for episode 5. Bye.